And many thanks for joining us here on Newsdesk. I'm Ernest Mino. Now, Ghana's COVID-19 confirmed cases has risen to 2,074, and that's from the previous 1,671. Now, we have 17 deaths. It means one more person has died from the disease and 212 recoveries. That is some good news there. Previously, we had under 200 people recovering from the disease, and that is the latest from the Ghana Health Service as far as coronavirus in Ghana is concerned. We have hit the 2,000 mark, in excess of that. Previously, the figure before this was 1,671. We had 15 recoveries. Now we have some 17 deaths actually. Of course, the recoveries has gone up to over 200. We will bring you more in our subsequent bulletin. But closely related to this is a case with the psychiatric patients, and the Human Rights Watch is urging Ghana to rethink a system that often restricts people's freedom and choices, and instead invest in services that let people with disabilities live independently. This came from the director in charge of persons with disability at the Human Rights Watch, Shanta Barega, in Brussels, after a psychiatric patient tested positive for COVID-19. Ms. Barega added that it is also a moment for government to ensure that people with disability are included in the COVID-19 response, emphasizing people with mental health conditions deserve no less than others. We'll get more from the Human Rights Watch on this, but first, let's engage the Chief Executive of the Mental Health Authority, Dr. Akwesi Osei, and he joins us on the phone. Doc, thank you very much for your time here on Newsdesk. Kindly tell us about this patient and how she contracted the virus. Dr. Akwesi Osei, thank you for your time here on Newsdesk. We understand that the Accra Psychiatric Hospital has recorded its first case. Tell us about this patient.
Hello, I missed all that point. Can you come again? Start over, please.
Tell us about the first patient, sir, that has tested positive for COVID-19.
Sorry, I missed the whole.
Dr. Akwesi Osei, can you hear me? Can you hear me now, sir? Hello, Dr. Akwesi Osei?
Yes, please.
You can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. So we understand that the Accra Psychiatric Hospital has recorded its first case. You have a patient there who was tested positive for COVID-19. Tell us about this case and how the patient contracted the virus.
Yeah, thank you very much and good morning to your listeners. Yes, this is a known patient who was brought into us to the psychiatric hospital. And we had the information that the hospital had the information that she had been to a private clinic where at that time she had had fever and cough, and she was tested for COVID and it was negative. Then she was brought to us for this mental problem. And she was admitted for the mental problem. Definitely she had been tested for COVID, it was negative, so they thought everything was fine. And while on the ward, she developed temperature and started coughing again. So that alarmed them, and they took the samples for testing, and it came out as positive. So that is exactly what happened. So she brought it from outside. So as it were, then the hospital management decided that all the staff who were with the patient, with that patient and other patients who were there, all needed to be isolated and tested. So
Dr. Akwesi Osei, just for clarity, so this patient you're talking about is not an inmate. This person is not in the Accra Psychiatric Hospital, was rather...
No, not an inmate after that time.
Okay, and this is how many weeks ago?
Sorry?
This is how many days or weeks ago?
This is just about, I think, 3 or 4 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but as I said, it's a known patient on outpatient basis, but not a resident within the hospital.
Okay.
Not an inpatient.
So you were telling us about testing people who have come into contact with this patient.
So they tested them, they sent them, I think it came to about, after that time, they thought it was, 87. But as the team came and they began testing, other contacts also came. So a total of over 100, about 110 or so, staff and patients. The patients themselves at the ward, they were 11, so they were all tested, and then staff and other contacts within the hospital. So about 110.
Okay, so 110 people.
The staff, because they were going into isolation and bring other staff who, with full protective gear, are now attending to the patients there. And this one has been sent to a treatment center anyway. The original patient has been sent to a treatment center. And that was another issue. We needed to go through a little hassle before eventually.
Yes, I was just going to come to that, because the news we have, the information we have is that initially this patient was rejected because of her status or condition as a psychiatric patient. How true is that?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And these are the challenges we face within the mental health sector. And I'm hoping that with the COVID, things are generally changing. In fact, this COVID condition is going to change, and it certainly will change attitudes generally. It will change our mindset, structures and systems. But that's a different story. And I'm hoping that one of the things it will change is our attitude towards the mentally ill. So this patient was, you know, before you transfer a patient from your facility to the treatment center, you need to go through your district or municipal directorate, health directorate. So they need to come and look at that and approve that yes, this is a patient who needs to be referred to the treatment center. So when they were invited, they came, they said no, because the patient is a psychiatric patient and they can't handle the patient there. Meanwhile, every health worker has been given at least some basic knowledge in mental health care. But this is purely out of discrimination. They didn't want to. And eventually we needed to seek the intervention of the chief director or the minister of health before eventually the patient was admitted to the treatment center.
So when was she admitted? How long did it take?
No, that all that happened yesterday.
All of that happened yesterday.
That's right.
So this patient is now in a treatment center and has been attended to. On the 110 people you say have had their samples taken, when was this?
That was yesterday.
So all samples have been taken yesterday?
Yes.
And how many are on self-isolation?
They've all had the patients on the ward. So now the ward itself has had to be declared as an isolation ward. You can't bring any patient there.
Okay.
But for the staff, they all have had to go into self-isolation until their results are in. So they are not coming to work. So you need to pull other staff to support the patient.
Just a bit of a clarity, the 110, does it include staff, or these are all patients within the ward?
No, the patients are only 11 within the ward.
Okay.
The rest are staff.
Okay. Okay.
The rest are staff. Staff and other contacts within the hospital, maybe relatives around, visitors around. But I'm yet to get the exact numbers of how many of them actually constitute the staff. But the patients are only 11. The rest are staff and other contacts. Dr.
Kusiosa, I want you to hold the line briefly for me. We've been joined by the Director in charge of Rights of Persons with Disability, the Human Rights Watch, Shanta Barega in Brussels, for more on this. Shanta, thank you for your time here. You're joining us from Brussels. You have heard about the issue here in Ghana, about how a patient was initially rejected because of her status as a mentally or mentally challenged person. What was your reaction to this?
Well, we've been following the situation in Ghana for 9 years now. I have been visiting across psychiatric. I have met Dr. Asai and have worked with him closely. And we were happy to see that the case was taken seriously and that steps were taken immediately. The director of the hospital is an incredible woman, and she's really been they're trying their best given the circumstances. But as Dr. Asai mentioned, it's an issue about changing attitudes and changing the whole way the mental health system works. And this is a really important opportunity for us to take the experience of COVID and actually make some changes in the way that we treat someone with a mental health condition and how we support them to be able to live at home and to have constructive and productive lives like the rest of us.
Very well. So the initial case and your concern was that this person was rejected. Now we understand she has been admitted to an isolation center, a treatment center actually. What are your expectations as far as treatment is concerned because of the special case?
Well, I think it's incredibly important that there be no discrimination against anyone with a mental health condition or psychosocial disability. The fact that the treatment center initially refused her is blatant discrimination, and that can no longer take place. And we hope that she and any other patients who have COVID who come forward, who may also happen to have a psychosocial disability or a mental health condition, that they're also treated the same way anyone else is. They should be given the care and the medication and the support that they need. And that might include support related to their mental health condition, and that might relate to what they might need to address COVID. But both of those issues should be addressed without any discrimination.
Dr. Akwesi-Osei, without disclosing to us where exactly this patient is, have you been to the treatment center? Have you been to the treatment center, and what do you make of the conditions? Do you think the condition is right for this person because of the case you are dealing with?
Well, I wasn't there. I was not there myself, but the information I'm getting is that, yes, she's getting the right treatment. She's getting the treatment like anybody else, so that is fine. Of course, if her mental health problem comes up, we will be called upon to go and see how we have to resolve it. But going forward, and I've discussed that with the chief director, we will need to convert one of our wards at Pantan Hospital. We've identified a ward at Pantan Hospital to be used as a treatment center.
Okay.
Because this is the one that means, indeed, this is not the only case. You have had to go to the treatment centers. You've been called to go to the treatment centers to treat some patients there. So obviously, once mental illness or mental health issues are part of human story, this will come up every now and then. And so we need to get a treatment center. Fortunately, the chief director has bought into that idea, and we are working on upgrading or rehabilitating or renovating a ward at Pantan Hospital to use as treatment center. I guess we're also required to do a similar thing at Ankafo, so that anybody coming from around that area who Ankafo sees can also be seen there.
That is some great news there. But before all of this, the minister in charge of Children, Gender and Social Protection had announced some measures for persons with disability and all these vulnerable groups, including patients at the various psychiatric hospitals. What form of support have you received throughout the period from the ministry or from government directly to deal specifically with COVID-19?
Well, we've been discussing with her, and I was at a meeting with her. She invited me to a meeting she was attending. So I was at that meeting. We discussed, in fact, even seeing how we can remove persons with severe mental illness on the streets for them to be treated. So that has been discussed. Specifically, what has been brought to the psychiatric hospitals is part of what we are benefiting from the ministry or from the government generally. So nothing specifically from the Ministry of Gender and Children and
Let me go to Shanta and find out. Shanta, I don't know what you make of what has happened so far as provision for persons with disability, vulnerable groups and psychiatric patients is concerned in Ghana. You say you have been following. Do you think we have done enough? And what do you expect government to do going forward?
Well, I think in the case of people with psychosocial disabilities, there needs to be a real respect for their rights. And that includes when if there's an effort to pick them and find them on the street and bring them to a hospital, they must consent to that. They must also be able to say yes or no whether they want medication once they arrive there. And if you and I go to a hospital and we refuse medication, or we prefer having a certain medication, or in fact, if we just want to go home and be with our family, we would have a right to do that. But when it comes to somebody with a mental health condition, they lose all of those rights. And that has to be respected at the core of any effort that's made in terms of COVID response, as well as in terms of the efforts to make sure that the rights of people with mental health conditions are respected across the board, whether we're in the current pandemic or afterwards. I think the government of Ghana has done a good job in moving. As I said, I've been looking at the situation since 2011, and there has been a lot of progress. And we've worked really closely with the Mental Health Authority on a lot of the progress and ensuring that people's dignity is restored. But we still see again and again work we've done not only in the psychiatric hospitals, but also in the prayer camps. In prayer camps, across Ghana, we visited Nyakumasi Prayer Camp and Mount Horeb in Central Region. And they continue, in Mount Horeb at least, to chain people. Up until my last visit in November last year, people are forced to defecate, forced to urinate. They're fed and they eat in chains in prayer camps across Ghana. And that needs to stop. And the government, and I know Dr. Asai is committed to this in particular, but the government across has to make sure that all of the ministries join forces and ensure that there is a ban on this kind of inhumane practice, but that ban has to be enforced. And there needs to be more efforts to make sure that people get the kinds of things they need to have a decent life. They need to get jobs, they need to get housing, they need to get access to food. And one of the men I met, named Felix in Nyakumasi prayer camp several years ago, he was chained to a tree for 5 years when I met him in 2017. 5 years. This is where he spent every morning and every evening. Yeah. And in 2017, thanks to the good work of the Mental Health Authority, he was actually released along with 16 other people.
Yeah, so Shanta, indeed, we have made some gains as far as mental health is concerned, but specifically on the issue of COVID-19, you have also raised the issue of congestion, which has always been a problem. But within this special time we are, within this, we are not in ordinary times, should we allow patients to go home? And you talk about that. Why should we be looking at that option around this time?
We should. I think congestion is an issue, no matter what kind of services, whether it's prisons or psychiatric hospitals or residential institutions. Social distancing is nearly impossible in these settings. Hygiene is also very difficult in these settings, as much as the efforts might be made by the administration. So yes, as we as Human Rights Watch have said, that these places, whether they're prisons or psychiatric hospitals or other places that hold people in closed settings, they need to be released. They need to be returned to their families. But particularly in psychiatric hospitals, so many people are held against their will. And it's really important that they have a choice about where they want and what kind of support that they want to get.
Dr. Kosose, let me get the thoughts of Dr. Osei, who is on the other line with us. Doc, I don't know what you make of this suggestion for people who wish to go home for treatment around this time to be allowed to do so. Is that possible around this time?
Well, congestion is not an issue with us now. You remember some time back there were about 2,000 patients across the 3 hospitals. Accra Psychiatric Hospital alone had about 1,200, 1,300, and we systematically decongested 10 patients who were well enough to go home. So as at now, that is not an issue. Accra Psychiatric Hospital has just about 300 patients, Pantan just about 200, and Kafo just 100 or 150. So that is not a major issue. Now, the other point is that those who wish to go home, in fact, those who are well enough to go home, just at the onset of the COVID issue, we sent quite a number who were well enough to go home. But we certainly cannot send somebody who is not well enough to go home. I mean, you would, as a relative, would not be happy to see your ward coming there who is obviously psychotic or obviously elated, aggressive, and it's because of COVID, we release it.
How many did you send home? Are you able to tell us or give us a range?
Well, I don't have the figure now, but the point is that those who were well enough to go home, we will send them. And as we move on, anybody who is well enough to go home, we will continue to send. But the emphasis is that you are not well enough to go home.
Doc, we're wrapping up on this, but tell us, what are the challenges you're facing now, and what do we need to do for people who are in your hospitals and for psychiatric patients across the country?
I think we need to continue to get more PPEs. Very, very crucial. More logistic support. The hand sanitizers, the PPEs, medications. We need to get money to improve upon their feeding. These are real issues that we need to have. We have ourselves put some measures there. Anybody who is coming to the hospital, either as a patient, as a visitor, as a family member, or you go through the hand hygiene measures, hand washing with water, soap. You have the Veronica bucket there, the sanitizers there. Your temperature is taken. All that is done. And if you are a candidate for suspicion or a case, then you are taken to a holding center and necessary arrangements are made. So all those measures are done. But these are some of these measures are consumables. They will finish, we need to beef them up. So we need more hand sanitizers, we need more of PPEs. Everybody, if you have somebody there at post, that person may need to wear the PPEs 2 or 3 times because it's so uncomfortable that you, after some time, you need to go and change over. So we need a number of them. So this is the logistic support plus financial support that we need to continue to get. And eventually, we need to get a treatment center within the psychiatric hospital.
Dr. Avisioso, thank you very much for your time. Yeah, Shanta, I was just coming to you for your final words. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And if I can add, I mean, I think as Dr. Sai said, some people were able to send home, and that means that they probably shouldn't have been in the psychiatric hospital for as long as they were. So hand in hand with these immediate efforts, there needs to be a buildup of community services. People need to be able to get mental health services near their home so that they're getting it on a regular basis and getting the supports they need so they don't even have to come to across psychiatric or other psychiatric hospitals. And that's where the investment needs to be. It needs to be there from the Mental Health Authority, from donors like the UK government and the WHO, the World Health Organization, who are there already working. But those efforts need to be scaled up so that people don't need to resort to going to a psychiatric hospital or forced to go to a psychiatric hospital. And instead, they're able to get care at home, and that those services are available and affordable and are accessible. And that's really where Human Rights Watch and our partners locally, many organizations on the ground, are pushing the government and other key bodies to make sure that this is part of their rights. This is not an option. This is about respecting the rights of people with mental health conditions. And that means that they should be able to get the care they want and the support they want in the way they want it.
Shanta, thank you very much for your time. And she is Director in Charge of Persons with Disability, Human Rights Watch. She joined us for this conversation following the news that one person at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital has tested positive for COVID-19. And just in case you do not know, Ghana's confirmed cases of COVID-19 has risen. We are now at 2,074 with 17 deaths and 212 recoveries. And that is the latest from the Ghana Health Service. And let's do some other stories now, still COVID related. A study by a group of researchers from the KNUST, University of Ghana, University of Cape Coast, and the University of Education Winneba concluded that most people do not wash their hands in accordance with the WHO standards of not less than 20 seconds per hand wash. Interestingly, some people living in Ghana were not practicing frequent hand washing with soap and the running water in a day before the COVID-19 pandemic as compared to during the COVID-19 period as we have it now. However, a decline in the frequent washing of hands in a day is likely to be observed in the country after the COVID-19 pandemic period. If this trend continues, then there's the likelihood of Ghanaians and non-Ghanaians becoming more exposed to not only COVID-19 diseases, but also to all diseases associated with personal hygiene or hand washing. Now, this may result in high fatalities in diseases pertaining to personal hygiene, and that's all in the research that we have now. Let's get more on this from the researchers, and I'm joined by phone by the lead researcher, Francis Minta Dazi, who is a graduate student at the Department of Biochemistry and Biotechnology, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. He's on Zoom. Thank you very much for joining us. Where was the research conducted and within which period?
Okay, thank you very much. This research was conducted by postgraduate students. These postgraduate students are found across the entire country. That is KNUST, UCC, University of Ghana, UEW, that is postgraduate student doing masters and PhD. And this study was conducted during this COVID season or COVID-19 pandemic season. And then we tried to look at, we all know that hand washing is one of the predominant ways or means that we can prevent ourselves from contracting the virus. So what we did was I wanted to see whether people were washing their hands before the COVID-19 season, and then during the COVID-19 season, and then after the COVID-19 season too. We want to see whether people will frequently wash their hands. So that is what informed our decision into this whole research.
Okay, so your finding is that we have a lot more people not washing their hands post-COVID-19. Even as we have it, the finding is saying that not many are doing it according to the WHO standards. We'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but let's talk about the methodology and the sample size. I know you did a quantitative approach, but tell us a bit more about it. Quantitative.
Okay, what we did was we used a multi-stage sampling technique where we considered the various regions across the country, and we tried to look at respondents. That is a total respondent of 1,042. So that is the total respondent that we had for the study. And what we did was that we used
1,042 across the country.
40, yes, please, 1,042 across the country.
Okay.
Yeah. So we administered questionnaire to them. Some were done during the lockdown period. So we had to use the online method for that one. And then some too was done before the lockdown period. So what we did was we administered the questionnaire to them by handing it over to them, and then they responded as usual.
There's something interesting about the social demographics in this, and I want you to highlight that for me. For instance, with the gender, there's something interesting I see there. There's also education. If you could just take it one, let's start with education. And what did you find with persons who are educated as compared to those who are not, or less educated?
Okay, so what we found was that the females were more likely to engage themselves in hand washing or frequent hand washing, but the males were more likely adamant to the washing of their hands frequently. So this creates a problem, and we all know that men are always known to be people who normally like taking risk. So that is what we can attribute to that. But what we want to entreat males is that they have to engage in hand washing as well. And then those who had gone to school, that is, those who have had some level of education, we realize that those people wash their hands frequently as compared to those who haven't attended any school before, or those with no formal education, as our study captured it. So what we also realized was that those people who are within the ages of 21 and 40 years, those people who are within the ages of 21 and 40 years are less likely to wash their hands frequently. But those below the 20 years, and then those above 60 years, that is the old aged, and then the young aged group, we saw that they were frequently washing their hands. And
I find that very interesting. 21 to 40 not washing their hands. Why is that? Is it because the perception is that because this is an immune system, battle, and perhaps these group or people think that they are strong enough to deal with the disease? Is that it? What reasons are assigned to this?
Yeah, exactly. So those age group, or those within that age group, normally feels nothing can harm them, and they are in for business. They are going all their way out. They will not let someone to dictate life for them. They already know what life entails. But you realize that those within the lower age bracket, they feel like they have more years ahead of them. They have a lot to achieve. So why don't they engage themselves in frequent hand washing and prevent themselves from being infected with the virus? And those aged group, we all know that in our Ghanaian community, the old aged normally are afraid of dying. So they usually engage in this frequent hand washing more than those within the age bracket of 41 and 21 and 40.
And that is quite worrying, because that is really the active population bracket of the country. What are your recommendations on following the findings that you have?
Okay, so what we are recommending now is that more education. We all know that the media is taking their part, or making a lot of impact in sensitizing the Ghanaian populace in frequent hand washing. And we also know that the government is also putting in much effort to help people engage themselves in frequent hand washing. However, the problem now has left with we, the individuals, to have a change of mind and a change of attitude to frequent hand washing. And when we have this change of mind and change of attitude, we will definitely make this whole thing subside, in the sense that, so what we recommend is that the education should be intensified. That is one. And then also, as individuals, we need to try as much as we can to change our attitudes and then frequently wash our hands. But one question that I always ask is that when we go around now, we always see the Veronica bucket and then the liquid soaps or the soaps around or at workplaces. The question I'm asking is that, are we going to continue this system forever? Because what we recommend now is that organizations need to continue this system so that frequent hand washing will become part of us. Because we also realize in the study that those who are non-Ghanaians normally frequently wash their hands than those who are Ghanaians. And the notion that we cannot draw is that most of them are living here alone. So they don't have families and they are afraid of dying. They don't have anything. So they have to prevent themselves from contracting the virus. But we, the Ghanaians, are so much adamant sometimes in washing our hands.
And I must commend you, Francis, and the team for doing this research at a period when we have schools shut down and most of the things moved online. How are studies going for you and the rest of your colleagues?
Okay. By God's grace, everything is going on well. I'm a PhD student, and we did it with some masters and then PhD students as well. And we are all going through that season of using online studies. I've been doing presentations online, and I've been also submitting some form of assignments and then some form of 10 papers online. So, but it has been good, just that some people are facing challenges. And what we want to entreat the university authorities, that is all the universities across the country, is that they have to try as much as they can to provide bundle, that is internet bundle for students, and so that they can at least feel some form of relief in their quest of achieving academic excellence. So that is what we want to say.
Francis, thank you very much for your time here on NewsDesk. Francis Minta is the lead researcher. He led a group of students, graduate students from the University of Ghana, KNUST, UCC, University of Education, Winneba, to conduct some research on hand washing. And of course, we shared those details with you and their findings from that research. Now, so you have less than 3 times, so that's the figure, 54% doing less than 3 times of hand washing. You have 36.4, 3 to 6 times. Also, we have 7 to 10 times, that's 7.6, and then more than 10 times, 2%. So a lot more people are not doing the hand washing and not doing it right, per the WHO standard. And this one also says frequent hand washing before COVID. So before that, yes, we had 57.1, and then no, we have 42.9. Now, knowledge of treatment of COVID-19 disease. Yes, we have 29.4 and no 70.6. A lot more people still not well educated or armed enough with information on the treatment of COVID-19. And of course, he mentioned there that a lot more education has to happen. And then this one is on the knowledge of COVID-19, the general knowledge of COVID-19. And it is worrying. Okay, so at least we have a good number of people, 99.5%, who are aware. There's still some 0.5% who fairly do not have an idea of what we are dealing with this global pandemic. Now, on the screens, you also see that number of seconds used in washing hands per hand wash, more than 20 seconds, and the response there, 46.1, and that is good because you're supposed to do at least 20 seconds. Now, 10 to 20 seconds, we have 35.7. It can be better. And then, of course, less than 10%, 18. And that is worrying. And of course, this research was done across the country, all 16 regions, with over 1,000 sample size.
Hello, good morning to you. Welcome to Business. The National Insurance Commission, NIC, says new life insurance businesses have reduced by at least 50% as a result of the outbreak of the coronavirus, even though the Commission had earlier projected that life insurance businesses should double by end of 2020. The regulator fears this projection may not be met as a result of the pandemic. Speaking to Joy Business, Deputy Commissioner of Insurance Michael Ando said his outfit wants insurance companies to submit strategic plans to ensure their businesses are not hard hit.
Every business has to roll out its business continuity plan and make sure that we minimize disruptions. Disruptions there are and there will be, but minimize them and protect the lives of staff and customers and generally ensure safety. So we, at the very beginning, asked insurance companies to prepare and update or send to us their business continuity plans. We are monitoring to see whether they are working as required so that they can continue to service policyholders and potential policyholders as appropriate, be able to renew policies, to issue policies, to pay claims, to resolve complaints and let people, life goes on.
So let's look at life insurance. We know for the motor insurance or non-life insurance policies, there's still a way around it by way of ensuring that claims are paid, businesses are underwritten. What happens to life insurance, or what has happened to life insurance in this time?
We estimate that life insurance will be a little bit hit. This is because life insurance is usually sold by agents. And according to the 2018 figures, about 65% of life business is sold by agents, and that's face-to-face. And you know, insurance is sold, it is not bought. Okay, people don't get up and buy insurance. People have to go there and sell insurance to them. So when they have to keep social distance, when they have to minimize gathering crowd and things like that, you know, it's going to impede the ability of the agent to go out there and sell. So the general expectation is that the life business is going to be hit a little harder than the non-life business generally.
And just before we go here on News Desk, news coming in is that Ghana has this morning performed the first 2 autopsies on COVID-19 bodies, and that's a move pathologists say will help improve treatment of survivors in Ghana and possibly the world. And my colleague Latif Idris is following this closely. We'll bring you more on JoyNews today, but that's it for JoyNews Desk. Our top stories: Ghana COVID-19 cases hits 2,074 with 17 deaths and 212 recoveries. We also heard from the Human Rights Watch urging Ghana to rethink its measures in protecting persons with disability, including mental health patients, as the coronavirus pandemic spreads and as a psychiatric patient records test positive for coronavirus. Also, we heard from the researchers who have conducted some research across the country on hand washing, and they say that a lot more people are likely not to wash their hands post-COVID-19. Even as we speak, not many are doing it according to the WHO standards. And in business, underwriting of life insurance policies begin, and the insurance companies are already feeling the heat of COVID-19. You can log on to myjoyonline.com. You'll find a lot of stories there. My name is Ernest Min. Thank you for your company.